I just drove a 10-pound sledgehammer through the glass of my $5,000 saltwater aquarium. I didn't stop until the thick glass was a heap of jagged shards and 50 gallons of salt water were flooding my expensive hardwood floors. You probably think I've finally snapped. You might think the brain fog the doctors talked about finally turned me into a dangerous man. But I'm not crazy. I'm finally wide awake. I did it because that tank was hiding a waterproof bag that contained the stolen pieces of my life. My wife and my stepson thought I was too weak to ever swing a hammer again. They were wrong. My name is Miller. I'm 47 years old. I've spent 20 years building a high-end landscape design business in the suburbs of Austin, Texas. I've spent my life moving boulders, planting trees, and building outdoor paradises for people with more money than sense. My hands are rough, and my skin is tanned from the Texas sun, but I was happy. I thought I had built a real home for my wife, Sarah, and her 22-year-old son, Tyler. I'd raised that kid since he was 10. I'd paid for his college and treated him like my own blood. Everything started changing about 6 months ago. I started feeling dizzy every afternoon. My head felt like it was filled with thick gray wool. I'd be talking to a client and suddenly forget the name of the plants I'd used for 20 years. Sarah told me I was just burning out. She started making me health smoothies every morning and giving me vitamins to help my focus. She'd look at me with a worried smile and tell me to go lie down while Tyler helped me with the business paperwork. I really believed her. I felt like a failure. I spent nights staring at the ceiling, wondering if I had some kind of early onset disease. Tyler started taking over the bank accounts and the contracts. He'd pat me on the back and tell me he was protecting the family legacy. I felt lucky to have a son who cared so much. I didn't realize he was just a vulture waiting for me to stop moving. The wake-up call came 3 days ago. I was restless, so I decided to check the hidden security camera I'd installed in the hallway years ago to catch a package thief. I'd forgotten the app was still on my tablet. I opened it at 2:00 a.m. and saw Tyler. He was in his pajamas, but he wasn't going to the kitchen for water. He was standing over my aquarium. I watched the screen as he reached deep into the filter system. He pulled out a small, waterproof black bag. He opened it, looked at some papers inside, and gave a sick, greedy grin. Then he tucked the bag back into the machinery of the tank and walked away. I sat in the dark for hours, my heart hitting my ribs like a trapped bird. I waited until they were both out of the house the next day, and then I checked the bag. What I found turned my blood to ice. It was a transfer of ownership deed for my house and my business. My signature was on every page. It looked just like mine, but I knew I hadn't signed anything. They had been drugging me with the vitamins to keep me foggy while they used a light box to forge my name on every asset I owned. There was also a brochure for a long-term memory care facility in a cheap part of the state. They weren't just stealing my money. They were planning to dump me in a hole and throw away the key. I sat on the floor of my office and felt a rage so cold it made my teeth ache. I realized then that my illness was a crime. That brings us back to the sledgehammer. Sarah and Tyler came running into the living room when they heard the glass explode. Sarah was screaming. Tyler looked at the water rushing across the floor and his face went pale. I just stood there, the hammer heavy in my hand, watching the colorful fish struggle in the inch of water left on the rug. I told them I saw a demon in the water. I told them the demon was trying to tell me where the money went. I gave them a wild, vacant look and let a little spit trail down my chin. I saw the look they exchanged. It wasn't fear for me. It was pure, predatory relief. They thought I had finally had a total mental break. They thought they had all the evidence they needed to call the facility and have me hauled away in a van. "It's okay, Miller," Tyler said, stepping through the water, his hand reaching out like I was a stray dog. "The demon is gone. Why don't you go lie down? Mom and I will clean up the water. We'll call the doctor to help you feel better." I looked at the ruin of the tank, then back at him. I forced a shaky, grateful smile. "Thanks, Tyler," I whispered. "You always were a good boy." I walked out of the room, leaving the mess behind. The first move was mine. They think I'm a broken man who just destroyed his favorite hobby. They have no idea that while the water was flooding the floor, I'd already grabbed that black bag, and the sheriff is just waiting for my call to read the contents. I spent the next morning staring at the ceiling fan in my bedroom. I made sure my hair was greasy and my eyes were wide. I needed to look like a man who was haunted by the water demons I de-invented the night before. I heard the wet vac running in the living room for hours as Sarah and Tyler cleaned up the 50 gallons of salt water. I could hear them whispering through the door. They weren't worried about my health. They were worried because they couldn't find the black bag in the mess. Sarah came in around noon. She was wearing her expensive yoga gear and carrying a glass of that thick green smoothie. She sat on the edge of the bed and stroked my hair. Her hand felt like a cold stone. She told me the doctor was coming by later to give me something for my nerves. She handed me the drink and told me to finish every drop. I took it and gave her a blank, vacant stare. I waited until she went to answer a text. Then I poured the smoothie into a hollowed-out book I'd hidden under my pillow. It smelled like crushed pills and bitter chemicals. I sat there for an hour, acting like a zombie, but inside my mind was sharp as a razor. At 2:00 a.m., while they were sleeping, I had done some real work. I'm a landscape designer. I know how to run wiring and hide sensors where no one looks. I had tucked 3 tiny microphones into the floor vents and a high-def camera inside the fake smoke detector in the kitchen. I pulled out my encrypted tablet under the covers and opened the feed. I saw Sarah and Tyler in the kitchen. Tyler was furious. He was throwing towels onto the counter. He told his mother that the bag was gone. He said he had searched every inch of the wet floor and the broken glass. He asked her if she thought the old mule had found it before he snapped. Sarah laughed, and the sound made my skin crawl. She told him that I couldn't even find my own shoes, let alone a hidden bag. She said the water probably washed it into the floorboards or the subfloor. Then she dropped the real news. She told Tyler that it didn't matter. She said she had a notary friend who was coming over at 6:00 p.m. She said they would use the forged papers to finalize the house sale tonight. "Once the papers are filed," Sarah said on the screen, "we call the transport van. They'll have him in the facility by midnight. We'll tell the neighbors he had a nervous breakdown and needed professional help." I sat in the dark, watching my wife and stepson plan to erase me from existence. I realized then that I wasn't just fighting for my money. I was fighting for my life. That afternoon provided the close call. I was sitting on the floor of my closet, the black bag open in front of me. I was looking at the forged deed, my hands shaking with rage as I saw how perfectly they had copied my signature. I didn't hear the bedroom door open. "Miller, what are you doing in there?" It was Tyler. He was standing in the middle of the bedroom, looking at the closet door. My heart hit my ribs like a battering ram. I had 3 seconds to hide the evidence. I shoved the papers back into the bag and sat on it. I grabbed a pair of my old work boots and started licking the leather. Tyler walked over and looked down at me. He saw me cleaning my boots with my tongue and let out a long, disgusted sigh. He didn't even look at what I was sitting on. He told me I was a freak and a waste of space. He reached down, grabbed me by the collar, and hauled me to my feet. He told me the legal guests were here and that I needed to come to the living room. "Time to sign your life away, old man," Tyler whispered in my ear. He gave me a hard shove toward the door. I stumbled into the hallway, acting like I couldn't find my balance. I told him the shadows were too bright. Inside, I was counting the seconds. The notary was in the house. The shady lawyer was probably with him. They were ready to steal my empire. I sat in my chair in the living room. I looked at Sarah, who was smiling at me like a saint. I looked at the man in the suit sitting at my table. I felt the weight of the black bag hidden in the back of my waistband, tucked under my baggy flannel shirt. The trap was set. They thought they were leading a lamb to the slaughter. They had no idea I was the one holding the knife. "Just a few more papers, honey," Sarah cooed, sliding a pen toward me. "To make sure you're taken care of." I looked at the pen, then at the camera in the smoke detector. The show was about to start. The dining room felt like a funeral home. The air was thick with the smell of Sarah's expensive candles and the damp, salty scent of the ruined floor. The man in the suit was named Sterling. He had yellow teeth and a briefcase that looked like it had been dragged through a swamp. He wasn't a real notary. He was a bottom-feeder lawyer who handled private matters for people who didn't want a paper trail. He sat at my dining table, looking at the papers Tyler had produced. He looked at me and asked Sarah if I was lucid enough to sign. Sarah nodded. She told him I was in the middle of a severe mental break. She looked at me with those fake, teary eyes and told me I just needed to sign the health insurance form so the doctors could help me. I sat in my chair, staring at the wall, letting a little spit trail down my chin. I played the part of the broken mule perfectly. I picked up the pen. My hand was shaking for real this time, not from the drugs but from the adrenaline. I looked at the signature line on the deed transfer. I didn't sign my name. I made a big, messy scrawl that looked like a bird's nest. Inside that mess, I wrote the word no. Sterling frowned, looking at the mark. Tyler lunged forward and grabbed my hand. He was red in the face, his eyes bulging. He whispered in my ear that I was making this difficult and that he was losing his patience. He told me to just draw the line or I'd never see the fish again. "I want to see the fish," I muttered, staring at the empty spot where the aquarium used to be. "The demons are hungry, Tyler. Did you feed them?" "There are no fish, you old freak," Tyler yelled. He was vibrating with rage. He grabbed me by the shirt and pulled me toward the table. That was the close call. As he jerked my shirt, the black bag I'd hidden in my waistband shifted. I felt it slide down an inch. I saw Tyler's eyes dart to the bulge under my flannel shirt. He froze. He looked at my face, then back at the bulge. "What's that?" Tyler asked, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. I didn't panic. 20 years of moving boulders teaches you how to stay steady when things start to slide. I let out a loud, wet laugh and reached into my pocket. I pulled out a handful of old, dried fish food I'd grabbed from the trash. I threw it directly into Tyler's face. I told him the demons needed to eat and that I was the one who controlled the harvest. Tyler recoiled, wiping the brown dust from his eyes and swearing. He was so disgusted by the fish food that he didn't reach for my waistband. He told Sarah he couldn't do this anymore. He told her to just get the final dose from the kitchen and be done with it. He told the lawyer to just notarize the mark I'd made and he'd fix the signature later. Sarah went to the kitchen. I heard the clink of a glass. I heard the sound of a spoon stirring. I knew she was mixing the digitalis with a heavy sedative. They were going to knock me out so they could haul me to the care facility van like a sack of grain. She walked back into the room with a tall glass of water. She handed it to me and told me to drink up. She said it was magic water that would make the demons go away forever. She sat on the arm of my chair and stroked my hair. It felt like a snake's skin. I took the glass. I looked at the oily film on the surface of the liquid. I looked at my wife. I asked her if she remembered the trip we took to the coast last summer. I asked her if she really thought I was that easy to erase. The room went dead silent. My voice was no longer thin or shaky. It was the deep, heavy boom of the man who had built an empire from the Texas dirt. "What did you say?" Sarah whispered. Her face went the color of old ash. "I said the water tastes like a 30-year prison sentence, Sarah," I said. I stood up tall and straight. I didn't use the cane. I didn't stumble. I pulled the black bag from my waistband and tossed it onto the table in front of the lawyer. I told Sterling that I'd already recorded his "fix the signature" comment. I told him he was about to lose more than just his briefcase. Tyler lunged for the bag, but I was faster. I've spent 20 years wrestling heavy equipment. I caught him with a left hook that sent him crashing into the wall. He hit the drywall with a thud and slumped to the floor, gasping for air. Sarah tried to run for the front door, but I'd already engaged the smart locks from my watch. She was trapped in the very house she tried to steal. I told her the smoothies had gone under the pillow. I told her I'd been watching every move she made since the night I checked the aquarium camera. "You're a dead man, Miller," Tyler screamed from the floor. He pulled a small, silver remote from his pocket. "I've already moved the money. I've been draining the business accounts for weeks. You have a house, but you have no company. You're broke." I felt a cold shiver. I'd caught the thieves, but Tyler was smiling. He looked like a man who knew he still had the winning hand. That's when the sirens finally hit the driveway. The blue and red lights flooded the living room, dancing on the broken shards of the aquarium glass. The sheriff was here, but as I looked at Tyler's phone, which was glowing on the floor, I realized the dark second layer was just the beginning. The business was a hollow shell, and the person who helped Tyler drain it wasn't Sarah. It was my own brother. The front door didn't just open. It flew off the hinges as Sheriff Miller and 4 deputies burst into the room. The blue and red lights from the driveway were so bright they made the shards of aquarium glass on the floor look like diamonds. I stood there, holding the black bag like a shield, and watched the world of my wife and stepson collapse. Sarah didn't even try to fight. She just sank onto the sofa, her face a mask of frozen, icy shock. But Tyler was like a cornered rat. He tried to lunge for the glass of drugged water, probably wanting to destroy the evidence, but a deputy was faster. He slammed Tyler onto the wet hardwood and clicked the handcuffs shut. The sound of that metal ratchet was the most beautiful thing I'd heard in years. I handed the black bag to the sheriff. I told him it contained the forged deeds, the plans for the care facility, and the records of the vitamins Sarah had been feeding me. I also pointed to the smoke detector and told him that every word spoken in this room for the last 48 hours was sitting on a secure cloud server. "You really did it, Miller," the sheriff said, looking at the mess. "You played the fool and caught the sharks." But Tyler started laughing again from the floor. He looked at me with blood on his lip and told me that the house didn't matter. He said my business accounts were empty. He told me that my own brother, Mark, had signed off on the transfers 3 hours ago. He said by the time the sun came up, my brother would be across the border with $3 million of my company's cash. I felt a cold stone settle in my stomach. My brother Mark was my accountant. He was the one who handled the payroll and the taxes. I'd trusted him since we were kids. Hearing that he was part of the plan to leave me broke and broken was a betrayal that hurt more than anything Sarah or Tyler had done. "Check your phone, old man," Tyler spat. "The bank alert's already hit. You're a king of nothing." I pulled out my real phone. I didn't look at the bank app. I looked at a different app, a GPS tracker I'd hidden on my brother's car a month ago. I'd noticed small leaks in the company accounts back in the spring. I didn't think it was a murder plot then. I just thought Mark was being sloppy with the books. I told the sheriff that my brother wasn't across the border. I showed him the screen. The red dot was sitting at a cheap motel just 10 miles down the road. I told the sheriff that Mark was waiting for a all-clear signal from Tyler that was never going to come. "I'm a landscape designer, Tyler," I said, looking down at my stepson. "I know how to find a leak in an irrigation system before it ruins the whole yard. Did you really think I wouldn't notice the money moving?" The look of pure, system-wide failure on Tyler's face was my first real victory. I told the sheriff that I'd hired a forensic accountant in secret 3 months ago. I told him that I'd already opened a shadow account and moved the bulk of my company's operating cash out of Mark's reach weeks ago. The $3 million Tyler thought they'd stolen. It was just a bait account, filled with high-interest debt and legal liens I'd restructured. "They didn't steal my money, Sheriff," I said. "They stole my debt. By morning, the creditors in Utah will be looking for Mark, and the FBI will be looking for all of them." The dark second layer was finally fully exposed. It wasn't just a family fight. It was a multi-state fraud scheme. Sarah had been using my brother's gambling debts to blackmail him into helping her. They'd planned to strip the business, sell the house, and disappear, leaving me in a drugged-out haze to take the fall for the missing millions. They led Sarah and Tyler out to the cruisers. As Sarah passed me, she stopped. She looked at me with those blue eyes, trying one last time to look like the woman I'd loved. She started crying, telling me that Mark had forced her to do it. She said she was a victim too. I didn't say a word. I just watched her get pushed into the back of the squad car. I realized then that I didn't even know who she was. The woman I'd shared a bed with for 3 years was just a character in a very expensive play. The sheriff stayed behind with me for a bit. He looked at the ruined aquarium and the dead fish. He asked me what I was going to do now. I told him I was going to finish my coffee. I told him I was going to wait for the sun to rise so I could see my land without the fog. But as I sat on my porch and watched the sirens disappear into the Texas night, I felt a vibration in my pocket. It was a text from an unknown number. "The money is gone, Miller, and so are we. You might have the house, but you'll never be safe." The dark second layer had a basement, and it was darker than I ever imagined. I sat on my porch for 3 hours after the police left, watching the Texas sun crawl over the horizon. The unknown number that sent the text didn't scare me. I'd spent 20 years moving earth and stone. I knew how to handle things that tried to stay hidden. I handed the phone to the sheriff's tech team, and within an hour they had a name. The text came from a guy named Vance. He was a professional cleaner for an estate fraud ring out of Florida. Sarah hadn't just found me by accident at that garden show 3 years ago. I was a target. She was a pro who specialized in finding successful, lonely men and stripping them for parts. The next few months were a slow, grinding march through the legal system. My brother Mark was arrested at that motel before he could even finish his cheap coffee. He broke down the second the handcuffs touched his wrists. He told the police everything. He admitted that Sarah had been paying him for a year to hide the leaks in my accounts. He even told them about Vance and the offshore transfers. The trial happened 6 months later in a courtroom in Austin. I sat in the front row every single day. I wore my best work jacket and kept my back straight. I wanted them to see the man they couldn't bury. Sarah tried to play the victim one last time. Her lawyer tried to say that I was a violent man, that I'd smashed the aquarium because I was dangerous. But then the sheriff played the audio from the hidden cameras. The entire jury heard Sarah and Tyler laughing about my brain fog. They heard Tyler talking about dumping me in a facility and taking my trucks. The real hammer fell when the FBI presented Sarah's real history. Her name wasn't Sarah. It was Monica DeLuca. She had 2 accidental deaths on her record in Florida and Georgia. Both were former husbands. Both died of heart failure. Both had large life insurance policies. She wasn't just a thief. She was a serial killer who used a wedding ring as a weapon. The jury didn't even need 4 hours to reach a verdict. Monica, the woman I'd called Sarah, was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Tyler got 30 years for conspiracy and attempted murder. My brother Mark took a plea deal. He got 10 years for fraud and money laundering. As they led him away, he looked at me and whispered that he was sorry. I didn't say a word. To me, my brother had died the second he signed those shadow accounts. It took a year to untangle the mess they made of my business. The Utah creditors tried to come for my house, but once the fraud was proven, the courts ruled the debts null and void. The forensic accountant Hatcher found for me managed to recover nearly 80% of my operating cash from the accounts Tyler had emptied. It turned out Tyler was too greedy to be smart. He'd left a digital breadcrumb trail a mile wide. I'm 48 now. I still live in the same house, but it feels different. I ripped up the hardwood floors where the saltwater had flooded the living room. I replaced them with simple, rugged stone. I didn't buy another aquarium. I left that spot empty. Sometimes I stand there and look at the floor, remembering the sound of the sledgehammer hitting the glass. It's a reminder that sometimes you have to break your world to see the rot in the foundation. My business, Miller Landscapes, is doing better than ever. I hired a new crew, honest guys who know the value of a hard day's work. I check the books myself every Friday night. I don't drink smoothies, and I make my own coffee. I've learned that trust is something you earn every day, not something you give away with a ring. I spent my life building paradises for other people. Now I've finally built one for myself. It's a quiet life. I spend my evenings on the porch, watching the Texas sky turn purple. No demons in the water, no fog in my head, just the sound of the wind in the trees and the peace of a man who fought for his life and won. The game is over. The vultures are in cages, and for the first time in my life the air is clear. I'm Miller, I'm a survivor, and I'm finally home.